Hello there and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, to this special coverage of Russia-Ukraine conflict. 2 days ago, President Vladimir Putin marked Russia's Victory Day by insisting that Russian forces in Ukraine were fighting for their motherland, but he made no major announcements in his speech. UK intelligence said that Russia will make this parade as a date to relaunch the military operation all over Ukraine again, but so far they were wrong. US President Joe Biden, on the other hand, said he was worried that Putin mistakenly believed the war would break up NATO as well EU. Outside the battlefield, Ukraine is still looking to be a NATO member, but on the other hand as well, French President Emmanuel Macron said, quote, "We all know perfectly well that the process to allow Ukraine to join EU would take several years indeed, probably several decades." To this point, several questions come to the scene. Why US and UK are looking to aid Ukraine with weapons only, not by diplomacy, and how Russia will face the sanctions impact with the coronavirus high number daily detected, and will Ukraine survive another month of battling against the Russians? To answer these questions, we have Mrs. Maliha Zibakhan, Assistant Professor of the Department of International Relations, National University of Modern Languages from Islamabad, Pakistan, and as well Ruslan Portnik, an international relations expert from Ukraine. Gentlemen, madam, thank you so much for joining us in this debate. The discussion begins right after this break. And before we delve into our discussion, German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock was in Ukraine on Tuesday. Annalena traveled to Bucha, a town near Kiev where hundreds of dead civilians were discovered after the Russian occupation in March, and spoke with residents of this locality.
We will continue to support European and free Ukraine in humanitarian, financial, economic, technological, political, and energy terms. And not only today, but also, and above all, tomorrow and in the long term. That is why we resume today the minimal presence of our German embassy here in Kiev, initially in a limited way.
We
can make a small contribution by supporting the investigation of war crimes and crimes against humanity as an international community by gathering evidence and ensuring that the culprits are held into account.
Das sind wir den Opfern schuldig.
Based on this speech, Mr. Bortnik, I'll be starting with you since you are in Ukraine. Don't you think the German late intervention to help Ukraine directly comes only when they felt there is a sense of winning the war against Russia? Why they couldn't aid Ukraine earlier?
Hello, colleagues. Thank you for this question. I think Germany is still looking the ways for resolution this conflict. And from the one side, Germany is not able to refuse any military help for Ukraine because all West behind the Ukraine. And the civic society, public opinion in Germany also stayed on Ukraine. But from the other hand, Germany is still looking the ways how to be out of this conflict and how to find the resolution with Russian Federation for peace building, because Germany absolutely clear understanding that this war is a big danger for Germany, for European Union in general, and of course for economic growth and economic competition, world economic competition for the European Union.
Quite understood. Mrs. Maliha, Russia's picture has changed in the whole world and precisely in Europe. So, as an international expert and a teacher as well, how can you consider this military operation so far? And what is the next step Putin may take?
Thank you very much for this question and for inviting me here. To me, that is not only the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. That is war of titans. The other titan, that is not Ukraine. Unfortunately, that is NATO. And if we look at the picture, Russia is having a stand which it considers a principled stand, but for the world, that is not a principled stand. That is just a lust for control of the region and to stop NATO's expansion. But if we look at the picture that Russia sees the world with another lens, which the world does not want to use, for which Russia says that it would be another world order for the coming or emerging world order. And Russia is resurging, no doubt in it, as if we look at the military capabilities of Russia, as well as its political influence in the world, we see that this conflict has put the whole world into a different kind of situation. If states look at Russia, few of them, they consider that Russia, whatever Russia is doing, that is about countering in American influence, increasing influence in the region and support to Ukraine. Whereas the countries also consider that war is something really bad, that is something really cruel, because the war between these two countries.
Quite understood. Now, moving on to the second point of our discussion, the re-elected French President Emmanuel Macron declared Monday in Strasbourg that to end this war in Ukraine, peace will have to be built without humiliating Russia. Let's have a listen.
Tomorrow we will have peace to build. Let's never forget that. We will have to do this with Ukraine and Russia around the table. The terms of discussion and negotiations will be determined by Ukraine and Russia, but this will not be done in denial, nor in exertion of one another, nor even in humiliation.
Mr. Bortnik, I'm coming back to you. French President Macron stopped his calling for negotiations with Putin because he didn't reach any solution. Now, after he was re-elected, he's in power again, he's calling back for Russia with a different way that appears to stand with Moscow to some extent. What's your take on this?
French president do a lot of attempts for the look in the peace resolution in Ukraine, but we should understand that Macron is not only leader of French state, but he also trying to be leader all over the Europe. Moreover, between the French and Russia, there are much more zone of conflict, zone of competition than Ukraine. For example, Africa, in African countries, Mali, Libya, and many other countries, when Russia and French are, they have a very hard competition between them, many places around the world. In any case, Macron trying to become the new leader of United Europe after the Angela Merkel gone, and he will continue his attempts to talk, to negotiate with Russia and Ukraine. And of course, we understand that there is impossible to find a peaceful solution for this war without the communication of Russia. But at the same time, Great Britain and sometimes United States criticizing the French president for such type of diplomacy, and there are a lot of competition between different type of negotiator, French, Turkey, Israel, and many others who are trying to make influence of Ukrainian conflict.
Perfectly understood. Mrs. Maliha, based on what Mr. Bortnik has mentioned, and don't you think that there is a sort of two-faced challenge between the NATO leaders? In other words, some of them are trying to escalate the war, such as UK and Germany. On the other hand, France, Turkey are looking forward to bring the peaceful resolution close to the table.
So much so I have understood your question because the connection was lost once again. I can say that all the states in the Europe and especially in the region, that Black Sea region, all of them are trying to find some peaceful solution. But being honest as an academic, I can say that that is just a safest side, taking a safest side. Yes, Germany could be a very effective negotiator if Angela Merkel was there. But since now she is not there in the picture, Germany can again play effective role than the other countries. Because the problem which is putting them on the losing side or the side on which they feel weakened, that is their energy reliance over Russia. Russia is having a big edge. Even though Germany has announced to stop Nord Stream 2 project in favor of sanctions which have been put on Russia, but I do not think that that is going to put a lot of impact on the situation. I think that this situation needs to be dealt between the two parties directly. Negotiators cannot play an effective role until they are determined to solve this issue. If we look at USA, that it announced for $40 billion of military assistance today, military and economic assistance. That means that fueling the war, that they are supporting Ukraine in this way, whereas if you look at Russia, that is not going to lose this position because that is a geopolitical need. Having Ukraine in their control or in their influence is their need. So I can just hope that they find some peaceful way sooner. That is seemingly not there in visibility.
Thank you, Mrs. Maliha. Now, moving on to another point, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said he expects Ukraine to obtain candidate status for the European Union in June. He also mentioned the Russian strikes on Odessa in a video addresses. Let's have a listen.
We hope to receive a positive response regarding the acquisition of our country's EU candidate status in June. Despite the presence of the President of the European Council, Russian troops have launched a missile attack on the Odessa region again. This is Russia's true attitude towards Europe, and it has always been so, despite what is said in Moscow.
Mr. Bortnik, French President Emmanuel Macron has said it will take decades for Ukraine to be accepted into the European Union. Based on this statement, why it is so hard for Ukraine to be an EU member before the war and even now?
I think Ukrainian president, of course, and French president should be right absolutely in this situation, because nowadays we are talking about the status of candidate to the European Union, and this status I think Ukraine should obtain during this year. But talking about the full membership of European Union, it should take much more time than previous status. For example, Turkey is more than 20 years is in the status of candidate to the European Union membership. Many countries from the south of Europe has some, also are the candidates more than 10 years. I think Ukraine should obtain the candidate status this year, but the full membership and the dialogue about the full membership should go on for the many years or many decades. Moreover, it's very important, I think, for your understanding, behind Ukrainian political curtains, people say that Russia is ready for Ukrainian member to European Union, and this member to European Union should be part of peaceful agreement between the West and Russia on the Ukrainian conflict. Ukraine will go to the European Union, but Ukraine will not be taken to the NATO. Ukrainian membership in European Union will compensate for Ukraine losses during the war, will be good political symbol and instrument for team of Mr. Zelensky, which lead them to re-election in the next election. And it should be a part of this agreement. Talking about the membership more, of course we should understand that Ukraine is a big country. And if Ukraine will become a full member of European Union, it will change on the architecture of European Union. Ukrainian deputies to European Parliament, with Polish deputies, with Baltian countries deputies, will make the main power in this parliament. Ukrainian presence in European Union institutions will change the balance of power inside of European Union to that countries which are oriented to United States. Ukraine, Polish, Baltic countries, Hungary, and so on. And this is dangerous, dangerous for Germany and French, and this is a biggest problem in Ukrainian acceptation to European Union.
This is really strong points you have raised. Mrs. Maliha, how can you consider, don't you think what is this point has been raised is a kind of a sort of contradiction? EU is trying to help Ukraine. At the same time, they are refusing Ukraine to be joined. This refusal based on what? Are they afraid of from Russia, or Ukraine may cause problems to this union?
I think that European Union and Ukraine's current situation and the possibility of it becoming a member of European Union, that can change things to the other side as well. It can help in getting some kind of peaceful solution once if they go for in two steps basically. Once they have to go for ceasefire, they have to stop this bloodshed because Ukraine is getting converted into ruins right now. And if you look at that situation or the map of the war, we see that one by one they are going closer inside Ukraine, and Russia's attacks are getting serious on Ukraine. Whereas if you look at support coming from European Union, that can be effective if Ukraine starts thinking about seeking a political solution of the situation. Changing the regime might be one solution in this situation. Changing regime of Zelensky and trying to find another solution or going towards another election and finding a regime which is more suitable to Russia, and that would be done while staying in. If Ukraine stays in European Union's influence, and then the situation goes in favor of Ukraine. If they once they stop war, and then the time to recover to go towards political situation or solution.
Quite understood. Now moving on, Hungary's Foreign Minister Peter Szijjártó said on Monday that the country's economy would be destroyed unless Russian shipments via pipeline are exempted from the EU oil sanctions against Moscow. Peter said that following talks with EU officials, an agreement between Budapest and Brussels on the proposed ban still looked unlikely. The EU's executive arm is willing to help Hungary and other countries dependent on Russian oil, according to the EU Commission spokesman.
We acknowledge that Hungary and other countries that are landlocked and have a significant energy dependency on Russian oil supply are in a very specific situation, which requires that we find specific solutions. So that was what the discussion was about. It was a very constructive discussion, which allowed us to identify a certain number of issues on which to work.
Mr. Bortnik, Hungary was the first country that responded to Putin's call to pay by ruble. Yet, the sanctions imposed on Russia destroyed the basis of its economy. So, as a European, do you think this sanctions policy is really going to bring a way out for Ukraine by sacrificing other countries? If so, will you accept this?
One more good question. We should look at the GDP rates which was prepared by International Monetary Fund for 2022, prognosis of International Monetary Fund, and we will see that the North America and Asia and South Asia are the most developing countries during these years, and and you will not see there Europe Union. You will not see there African countries, and of course you will not see there Russia and Ukraine, because any sanction on the Russian energy sector from the European Union leads for the growing of prices for energy products inside European Union markets, and leads for the growing prices of all the goods and supplies which are producing their economy of European Union, and leads for losing the place in the world market competition from the European Union side. Of course, Hungary, and not only Hungary, many countries inside of Europe understand it, and they are trying to defend their right for obtaining the cheap Russian energy products. Talking about Hungary, we should remember that the problem not only about the oil or gas, but also about the nuclear power, because Russia is building a nuclear power station plant in Hungary at the same time. So, as a final solution, Hungary is still not ready to support European sanction for the Russian energy products. But at the same time, Hungary supported many other sanctions on the Russian side. For Ukrainian, it's also a problem because only European Union is, for nowadays, is only one way for obtaining the oil and gas, because our borders from Russia and Belarus is closed absolutely. And nowadays, in Ukraine, we have the most expensive cost for oil in Europe at all, more than 2 euros and even more, or near 3 euros by the 1 of liter for oil, for example. And of course, these sanctions they made a big influence of Russian economy, but at the same time they will not lead us straight to the change in the policy of Russian state. And we should see on the Iran or North Korea the same situation before. Perfect. I think sanction is good, but it's much better than negotiation, and the European Union should think over about their participation in peaceful negotiation.
Appreciated, Mr. Bortnik. Mrs. Maliha, previously I have talked to Mr. Hussein Askari, who is a member of the Belt and Road Initiative in Sweden. He told me that the sanctions imposed on Russia is a suicidal policy that will harm European countries more than Russia itself. Do you agree with that?
Yes, I absolutely agree with that, because Russia is in better condition if we talk about energy issues, because that is the artery which, if it is harmed, that is going to harm European economy, because the reliance over Russian oil and gas, that is one big issue. If we look at Russia in last year, in the year 2021, we see that 4.7 million barrels oil per day it was exported, and that is for gas as well. If we look at gas, we see that Russia is the 4th largest LNG exporter that fulfills 8% needs. If the reliance on energy sources over Russian energy sources is there, how can Europe fulfill its energy needs? And that is why it is going to be squeezed in terms of energy supplies, and that will harm its economy, sustainable economy, basically. And on the other hand, if we look at Russia has already started working on nuclear reactors. That is already working on larger nuclear reactors, though there are few reactors which are going to age in this year, but they have already started working on the smaller size nuclear reactors, which will fulfill their energy needs. And on the other hand, Russia's trade with China, Russia's trade with other countries in Asia, that is still there, because they are in strategic partnership, like with India. Russia is engaged into strategic partnership, and they are having trade.
Perfect.
States are not going to stop their trade.
Thank you.
That means that these sanctions would not be as effective as it is being supposed.
Thank you, Mrs. Maliha. The Italian Prime Minister Mario Draghi and U.S. President Joe Biden on Tuesday have joined and have confirmed the standing against Russia military operation in Ukraine. Mr. Bortnik, to what extent U.S. could keep its aid to Ukraine? Don't you think that the U.S. policy is based on the idea of weakening the Russian economy and its military operation? Briefly, please, because 2 minutes left, so we can give the word to Mrs. Maliha.
The strategy of United States to the Ukrainian-Russian war is changed during the last 4 weeks. At the beginning, the strategy was to help Ukraine to defend herself, and nowadays the United States try to help Ukraine to win this war. And the West, all the West, I think, Great Britain and the United States, looking and feeling like it's a great possibility for nowadays to resolve the Russian problem at all, to broke Russia at all. And this war became the war for existence of Russia, Ukraine, and all Europe region.
Thank you. Mrs. Maliha, don't you think that this U.S. policy toward handling this conflict between Russia and Ukraine works only for its interests? In other words, some reports claim that U.S. and U.K. want this war, the so-called military operation, to continue for the sake of weakening Russia's status.
Yes, partly I can agree with this thing, because if we look at US, we have seen that there are double standards which are being followed by the US and UK. If Russia has been engaged into war with Ukraine, that means that war will weaken its economic and military stability for even for few years. That can give a little break to America to get back to its position, which is being lost in the world as the superpower, as a sole superpower, basically. So that might be called as a conspiracy theory, because we cannot prove this version. But yes, whatever you have said, that can be true in a sense or the other sense, because if the Monroe Doctrine is true for the USA, and the similar kind of act is being done by the Russia in Ukraine, that is again could be called as a rightful act by Russia.
Thank you ever so much for all your clarification, Mr. Bortnik from Ukraine, Mrs. Maliha from Pakistan. Thank you so much for joining us in this debate. With this, we reached the end of our special coverage for today. Thank you so much for keeping it here with us on Al 24 News. With me, I'm Abdul Rahim Kashur, and bye for now. Have a blessed evening.